Hello and welcome to another video. Today we have January's book review, hence the bookcase and my slightly, dodgy setup that I've got going here. Started the year pretty well with the books actually, read some alright ones. So I've read 4 books this month, which pretty good going. I might as well get on with it. So the first book I read was the Bad Mothers Handbook by Kate Long. And it was a pretty good way to start the year actually. It was well paced and I love a bit of a family. What's a family? It's like pigs and stuff. No, a family drama, because the book has 3 main characters. So in the one house they have the grandmother, the mum and then the teenage daughter, and then it flicks between the 3 perspectives. So it's interesting to see all the different, how each person portrays a situation differently, if that makes sense, as where you are in the generation and what's going on in your life and things like that. And everybody loves a bit of teen pregnancy, and there is that in this book. As I said, it is written with 3 characters, but sometimes it is quite difficult to tell which character is giving you that part of the story. I think they tried to differentiate in font, but they didn't do it that well, and it did take me a little bit of time often to go, oh hang on a minute, we've moved from the daughter, now we're now with the mum, that's why this isn't making that much sense. And it took away from it a little bit. This book is set in 1997. I've had this book on my to read list probably since about 2002, maybe. No, probably later than that, probably about 2005. This is that one that I was talking about in the December book review, that I had one more book to read that I wanted to get read, and that was this one. Anyway, that's a side note. So the book is set in 1997, and I do love the nods to 90s culture that was in it. Like the butterfly hair clips and the spaghetti strap tops and things. And that just made me really want to go and listen to bands like Five, so I did. I like it when a book then influences the choices I make in other things. So yeah, I enjoyed the book. It was a real snapshot of that family at that period of time. You could really tell that, or it felt like that family was real and that you just peered in for that year or so and then they would have just carried on with their lives. It wasn't like you get with some books where it's quite clearly that is the book. They only exist in that point in time and they would never have gone on to do something else, whereas this, you really felt that, as I say, you just sort of peered through their net curtains and you were just watching their family for a little bit and then you carried on, which sounds creepy, but you know what I mean. But the ending wasn't that great. The ending of the story was good, but then they went on to do like an epilogue bit where it was a snapshot at different points, trying to show you what happened to each character, and I don't think it worked very well. It again made it kind of confusing. I think they should have just ended it where they ended it, and then maybe done, if they needed to, just done an epilogue in the style that the book is in, rather than just the paragraph here and there of a snapshot of each thing. But all in all, good book. Could have read it earlier, but I didn't. So that was the Bad Mothers Handbook by Kate Long. The second book I read was the Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. And I really liked the concept of this book. I got this for Christmas, and I really, really liked the concept. It basically was 4 kids go to a fortune teller, or whatever you want to call it, and they find out the year that they are going to die. And it follows them and how that knowledge impacts on their life and things like that, which is just an interesting concept. Would it have that big an effect on me if I knew when I was going to die? Would it make me go all carefree and gung-ho, or would I become, more conserved and careful and all of that? So I just found that whole idea really interesting. So I did have quite high hopes for the book. It was good. It was a good book, but it didn't quite reach what I was hoping it would. I mean, it was interesting to see how each of the, because they've obviously got very different dates, because otherwise it wouldn't have been a very good book. So they have very different dates, and it's interesting to see that as one or two of them reach their death date and they die, how that affects the other siblings and how they then view their date again. And yeah, that whole thought was interesting. But some of the ways, I'm not giving it away that they die, am I? Probably not. Some of the ways that, or at least the first sibling and the way that they die was so obvious. And I was like, man, if this is where this book's going, I'm not going to enjoy it if I can just guess every time how these people are going to die. But thankfully it did go a little in a different direction from where I thought it would. So that is that. It's not a flashy book. It's, you know, again, it picks, there's like 4 sections for each of the siblings towards the end of their life, and it shows you what's happening at that point. It's, again, well paced, but it's not really about the writing for me that made me enjoy the book. It was the thoughts that it provoked in me, and that to me is what made it more interesting. The story itself, I would have done it a bit differently probably, but I liked the things that after I'd put it down that I was thinking about, if that makes sense, even if it is a bit gloomy for a January when everywhere else, everything else is gloomy, the sky, you know what I'm talking about. However, it did just stop. It doesn't really end, if that makes sense. It just stopped. That was irritating. They could have easily ended this book. Easily. But it just stopped. I don't know what the thought process was in that, but that's how I felt. Maybe the author did think that she'd ended it, but I don't. But give her her due, she has done an awful lot of research for this book. The 4 characters have got very different lives, so that's a lot of research she had to do so that she could portray each person authentically. Didn't quite live up to my hope for it, but it was still a very good book, and that's The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. The third book that I read is, what's it even called? A Book of Fragments, I really can't talk. Book of Fragments and Dreams by Rebecca McManus. And this is a book of poetry, which is not something I ever read. It was a gift from one of the academics at work, which was very kind of them and most appreciated, but I just don't get poetry. I rarely understand what's going on in poems. I think I'm still like a child and prefer it when they rhyme. And it just reminds me of school and flicking through that anthology and reading them and going, why the hell are we trying to pick apart these poems? It wasn't fun. I just don't get them. But to say that, I read about the author. There's like a little bio beforehand, and she unfortunately was killed really early on, like just as she was finishing her degree with a hit and run, I think it was. And she was like a rising star in poetry and things like that, so they had high hopes for her. So her parents have put this book together from her notebooks and stuff like that, and the way they described her is this like happy-go-lucky, cheerful kind of girl. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. It might change my mind on poetry. It's not a pleasant story, and at least they've got something positive out of her life, I guess. But it didn't. I still don't get poetry. I still don't get it. Obviously these came from her notebook, and a number of them do feel unfinished. So that probably doesn't help someone like me that just doesn't understand poetry, or my brain doesn't get poetry. It's just not. As I said, it said that she's got like a zest for life and stuff, but most of these poems are really melancholic. They're really quite depressive. And that is also my understanding on most poems, is that they're kind of depressing. And that's another reason why I'm not that keen on them. Don't get me wrong, there were a few of them in here that I did like. There was one called The Lament to March, which I fully understand, because I'm not a big fan of March because it's very expensive. And there was one all about how that you want to stand out from the crowd and not be in a group in society, but in doing that you've added so many rules to yourself that you're even more constricted than if you just were part of a group in society. And those kind of things were interesting. As I say, there were a few in here that I did enjoy, but on the whole, I don't get them. They were kind of depressive, and I don't get them. if you're big into poetry, please let me know what I'm missing out on, because it could be something that I really enjoy if I understood it, but I don't. So that's that one. So the last book I read is Flawed, and this is by a whole bunch of people. So I believe there's like 7 authors for the 6 characters and the narrator, and I really enjoyed this book. This is my favourite book of the month, and I was surprised that it was my favourite book of the month. But then we all know that I like a book that's written in multiple voices because I'm nosy, so it always had that in its favour. But this is multiple people written by multiple people, yet I couldn't tell. It felt like one person had written the whole book, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because A, it made it flow really well, but B, then why did they bother writing it with 7 people when they could have just written it with one person? Did they just work really well together, or you see what I'm getting at? But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. To begin with, I was a bit shocked because I wasn't expecting the main characters to be teenagers. I know, well, now I know all of these people are big in the young adult fiction world. Granted, I've only really heard of one of them before I read this book. And if they're YA authors, then probably their characters are going to be teenagers. I didn't twig that, so I was expecting adults. They weren't. It didn't matter to me, but there we go. That was a bit of a shock when I was like, hang on a minute, they're not the age I was expecting when I read the back of this book, because nowhere on here does it say it's teenagers. So the book follows 6 people that meet in a lift, and then they meet up pretty much at the same time every year afterwards, and it follows their life and stuff. So you just see a snapshot of those characters, a bit like Bad Mothers Handbook, but that was for a year, whereas these you see them for a snapshot of a couple of days each year, and it goes on for about 5 years. So you get the feeling that they could have just carried this book going, because they could have done up to 10 years or this, that and the other. So again, it doesn't feel like the book ends. Feels like these characters could continue, which I didn't mind actually. Again, it just felt like I was dipping into their life to see that period of it, and then I was moving on, kind of thing. But to some that might be kind of frustrating that you don't get a definitive ending, but I liked it. I liked where they did end the book. I think it was quite fitting, but I do feel they could have carried it on if they wanted to, but then that would have been a very thick book if we'd carried on until they died. Doesn't really matter to my enjoyment of the book, but they had a Faye in it. And only got mentioned like 3 times, but they had a Faye in it, and you never get a Faye. Fays don't appear anywhere. Don't know why. I know a lot of them, but it appears to be a rather uncommon name, and they don't appear anywhere. I can never get like a keyring or anything with my name on it, yet a Fiona or a Francesca can. I know more Fays than I know Fionas and Francescas, but there we go. Was happy that she was in there. And lastly, each of the chapters are determined by, like, you know who it is, A, because they say the name, but they also have like these feet. And I really like that, because as you flick through the book, the feet slightly change to how the character is. So for example, there's a girl called Caitlin in this who is losing her sight. So as you go through her feet, she gets a stick and then a dog kind of thing. I'm not giving anything away by saying that. I really liked that way of denoting the chapters, and also giving a little hint on what's happened in their life, or you go, ooh, why is she wearing heels now, kind of thing. I thought that was very clever, and I really liked that. Really liked this book. Again, it was a present for Christmas. Most of these books are going to be presents, to be honest, that I'll talk about. And I was pleasantly surprised that I liked this so much. I always thought I'd enjoy it, otherwise I wouldn't have asked for it, but very surprised. Favourite book of January, this one. Whether it's the favourite book of the year, we'll find out in December, but there we go. And on that note, I'm going to go. If you've enjoyed this book review, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. And I'll see you next month for February's book review. Bye!